Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I see people are coming, so let's give it a couple of seconds more for our attendees to join, and then we will start. Yeah, just a couple of seconds. Okay, I see people coming, and I guess we can start. So again, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our fireside chat titled From Patient Voice to Evidence, Making Patient Experience Data Work in Rare Diseases. This is a fireside chat that we really wanted to have ahead of Rare Disease Day on the 28th of February to remind us the importance of working with patient experience data during product development. Of course, this is important and key in all disease areas, but especially rare disease, where behind every data set and every data point, there is a patient and a family navigating complexity and whose input is fundamental for correct product development. As I was saying, this is a live discussion, and the registration, the link to the registration will be sent out in a couple of days. Also, please note that all the participants that I see that are still joining us will be muted during this discussion, but there is a specific question panel where we highly invite you to send your questions and your comments, and we will address all of them today in approximately 30 minutes. So it's going to be 30 minutes conversation and then Q&A. Before we start, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. I'm happy to have with us Enrico Piccinini, Senior Vice President, Europe and International at Rare Diseases at Chiesi. Hello, Enrico, and thanks. And hello, Enrico. And together with us, there is also Jennifer Lannon, Senior Director, Registries and Partnership at Alira Health. Welcome, Jenny. Some of you may have seen that our CEO, Gabriele Brambilla, was supposed to be here today. Unfortunately, there is a big storm in the east coast of US, and he couldn't fly on time. He's flying right now. So we are happy to have Enrico and Jenny having this conversation with us. From my side, I am Giulia. I am Pierini, partner of Strategic Patient Engagement and Advocacy at Alira Health, and I am the co-chair of the Rare Disease Center of Excellence at Alira. So today, Enrico, Jennifer, and I are going to discuss on how qualitative and quantitative experience data can in rare disease drive product development. Of course, we will also talk about the challenges in this space, including scattered data, small population, difficulties in recruitment and in terms of guidelines. But we also want to keep the conversation very practical. So we are going to talk about the real world cases and strategies on how to overcome these challenges. As you can see there in the panel today, there are only industry representatives. This is on purpose because we want to show the business value of embedding patient experience data in product development. But we hope that in the panel and the attendees, our colleagues from the patient advocacy group, patient representatives or patient are here and can write their comments in the question panel. Now, before starting, I just want to briefly sum up the concept of patient experience data, just to be on everyone aligned and on the same page. By patient experience data, we mean all the qualitative and quantitative evidence that are collected through the direct interaction with patients. They can be, but not limited to, health and functional status, burden of the disease, treatment preferences, quality of life, and many more. And they are fundamental to appraise the patient perspective during product development. Myself, I've been working many years with physicians and I've been working many years with patients. Sometimes the two perspectives, sometimes and often the two perspectives are not aligned. So we need to have the perspective of patients, which are the ultimate users of the treatment that we are developing, accounted. Finally, there are quality standards, both in Europe and the US, that define how to collect, validate, and analyze patient data to make them robust and fit for purpose for regulatory and HTA purposes. So that's what we will mean when we will be speaking today about patient experience data. So with no further ado, I see that people are continues to joining us, but we will start, and people will keep entering. I just want to launch a couple of polls for with our audience and tailor make the conversation today. So I kindly ask the first poll to be launched and to collect the answer from our attendees. So the first poll, the first question that we would like to ask to our audience is, if in your organization, industry or no industry, is patient experience data currently used in rare disease programs? We have three answers. So yes, it informs all stages of product development, so from early development till post-launch. It's mainly used to support value communication in pre-launch or launch, or it's collected ad hoc, depending on project needs. I'll wait a couple of seconds more, and then I think we can look at the results. I'm not surprised, I have to say. So it's collected ad hoc, depending on project needs. It's 76% of the parties, so the vast majority of people today collect them ad hoc. And we understand that this is the standard practice. Today, with Enrico and Gianni, we are going to see a little bit, I mean, what it would be it would be best to do probably, and how to potentially move from an ad hoc engagement to continuous engagement across the whole product life cycle. Thank you very much. Second and last poll for the moment, I kindly ask it to be launched. Thank you. So what is the biggest barrier your organization faces when integrated PED, so patient experience data and rare diseases? Small and heterogeneous patient population, limited internal resources of budget, uncertainty around the regulatory HTA expectations, concern about data credibility, data quality, and difficulty translating insights into decision making. This is an interesting one, because it's actually about the topic that we want to talk about today. Understand what are the biggest challenges and how to overcome them. I think we are about to get the results. Yeah. Okay. So here the situation is way more homogeneous somehow. I see that, most of the people say small heterogeneous patient population, interesting. Limited internal resources or budget, okay. And difficulty translating insights into decision making. Okay, very interesting. Those are the top three scorers. Then we have some people, only 10%, 13%, that also have concerns about methodological rigor and data credibility, and no one has voted uncertainty around the regulatory and HTA expectations. Okay, this is interesting. And actually about this last poll is where I think we can start our conversation. In particular, the results of the second poll have highlighted as small and limited patient population is seen sometimes as a barrier, no? And as a stopper in patient experience data. I would like to start then with a recent example, and I will invite Jennifer and Enrico to keep it practical with example of something that has happened to us. I have to say just the most recent one, but not the only case where we have a client. So I'm talking about a pharma company that is entering rare disease, and they were worried about two things. So one, what they defined as slow recruitment in their trial, and the second one, the fact that having a small population and an heterogeneous population, and as such small numbers also in the trial, could result in a weak data package. So this is again a worry that we have and we face all the time. It's important to understand, and this is what the discussion that we are having with this specific client, that in rare disease, patient experience data has two complementary sides, the qualitative and the quantitative one. And the qualitative is fundamental to create, to assess and measure the value proposition, the patient-centric value proposition that we are going to create for our treatment, and as well to contextualize the quantitative data. Now, when we talk about quality and quantity, with this client specifically, we are discussing about PROs, PREMs, and PPS, so patient preference studies for the quantity side. And we are talking about ethnographics, interviews, or advisory board for the quality. So usually the qualitative as a smaller sample, of course, smaller pool, but we go more in depth on the why. We contextualize the need, we contextualize the clinical development plan, we contextualize the quality of life, the burden, what really matters to patients. And usually, I mean, theoretically at least, the qualitative part should come before the quantity in order to drive the validation through quantity and not the opposite. So there is an example that now is coming into my mind, is very famous. I think most of us know it, which is about probably the first one that I remember when I started working in patient engagement, and is related to Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So in this therapeutic area, usually the endpoints of study were very much clinical and, let me say, quantitative focused. We had, for example, 6 minutes walking test or forced vital capacity, so the standard clinical endpoints, but it was through qualitative interactions with the patient community and co-creation with patient community that the clinical development plan could change, and could change in something very meaningful as the endpoint of the study, that started shifted on something that was more meaningful on how patient experience change, such as, for example, PRO on upper limb function or daily life activities. So this is a success story taken under the framework of patient experience data, of course, on how the integration of the patient community can change and can address a little bit the problem related, for example, to a small population that we see when we talk about this topic in rare diseases. I'll stop for a second because I've been speaking for quite a while, and maybe I'll pass the floor to Jennifer first, and then Enrico for your perspective and maybe some cases that you might have as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, on the Duchenne front, I can't help but mention that I had the privilege of being on the board of One Rare, which was a small nonprofit patient organization started by a mother and son of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, who I think very well-known case of how patient experience data and patient involvement has really changed what we thought would be the traditional mechanism of FDA approval. Many of you might be familiar that the first drug that was approved for Duchenne from Sarepta was actually not approved by the FDA advisory panel. And I think many of us are aware that the vast critical involvement of patients and their caregivers in the community coming in person to those FDA meetings and sharing their personal lived experience in a qualitative way, you know, like it didn't show up in the trial data because it did not meet the primary endpoint, but it was that human experience and that human, you know, kind of qualitative input that seemed to play a really critical role in actually causing the FDA to, despite the FDA advisory panel suggesting not approval of the drug, ended up being the first drug that was approved for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So I just wanted to call that out and say Jen McNary, Austin, and Max Leclerc, unfortunately Austin, who passed away last year, but those types of patient voices can be extremely powerful in, you know, FDA regulatory decision making. Within our side of things, I think, you know, Julia, you mentioned that the small patient populations can be a really big challenge. We've definitely faced this before. A client came to us a few years ago needing to do a human factors validation study at a super, super tight timeline for FDA. I think we had less than 3 months to write the protocol, field the study, do the analysis, and submit the package to FDA for the PDUFA date. And we ended up oversubscribing it. And so we needed 10 patients. We ended up over enrolling 12 patients and had 100% adherence to the protocol and completion of the study for those patients. And cystinosis is an extremely rare disease, only about 500 in the United States that have it. So when we talk about it's ultra rare, very hard to find these patients. I think one of the biggest keys to success for us was doing it in a decentralized fashion. So we leveraged our technology health storylines to be able to do remote decentralized data collection, which is also what we use for our registries. And then we also partnered with a really involved and fabulous patient organization, Cystinosis Research Network, who without them, I don't think we would have been able to field the study. That was a result of like years of engagement between the sponsor and the organization. And so, you know, it can be done. You know, I want people to know that even when you have an ultra rare condition, like there are ways to actually obtain this patient experience data and make it work.
Thank you, Jenny. I think you mentioned a very important point, the co-creation side. You have overachieved because you have done it from the beginning with the patients, no? And together with them, of course, is the way to proceed, especially in rare and ultra rare, like in this case. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I know, Enrico, you also, when we were debriefing about the webinar, you also presented a very impactful case that I don't know if you want to share it with us.
Yeah. No, Julia, with pleasure. I hope that you can hear me well, because I have some probably issues from the technical point of view. I hope they're okay. No, the case that we were discussing, it's a very practical example, and it's connected to a patient support program that here in Chiesi we establish when we enter the epidermolysis bullosa as a disease. In the dystrophic EB, we had a topical treatment that was approved by both EMA and FDA based on the wound size reduction, and this was clinically meaningful, and the product was approved. So when we launched the product itself, we set up a patient support program that was, I would say, essentially driven to the fact that we were driving to support the patient families for wound care education, and also to create some level of community. This was our real target when we started. But we included in this patient support program some kind of voluntary data collection possibilities. For example, the daily dressing times, so the use of bandage that for this patient are extremely important, the pain that they were suffering during this dressing moments, the infection frequency happening on their disease, and even some question like how was changing mostly in your life, or how things were developing on the disease. So after some time, so almost 10 years, there was something very interesting coming up, because while the wound reduction, wound closing was basically following what we were expecting from the clinical trial, so this was in line with expectation. What was impressing all of us was that it was clearly reported that the dressing time each and every day was reduced by 30%, 30-40%. I think 30%. That it means for many families, some like a couple of hours a day dedicated to this activity. And also pain was reported as decreasing, maybe even quicker than the reduction of the wounds I mentioned, and coming even before the closing of the wounds. And it was incredible, because some patient was even remarking the fact that they were getting back their evenings in the family, or they were indeed getting more time for their, let's say, normal life in this respect. And people were not even screaming anymore during the utilization of bandage. And this is a very important matter. So when we act and we look into the picture more, let's say, scientifically and rigorously, let's put it this way, with the help of some academics, physician, and even patient association, was even visible the fact that there was a reduction of infection. There was an improvement of sleeping time, that it means in the end even a better management of the working time for family and caregivers in this respect. So, and this was useful for us for having different conversations, as you can imagine, with different other stakeholders, like, for example, payer or even some kind of regulatory body in some countries. This was extremely, extremely useful. And what was even probably more useful was that we start planning for the next development of possible solution within these diseases, even clinical endpoints, like, for example, indeed, the dressing time or the pain that were not considered before. So this, you know, was a big step to me, because it started from a pure, let's say, patient support program, something utilizing to support the family in their daily, unfortunately, trouble. But in the end, this became something like a real-world evidence platform. So something that is changing the parameters of approaching a disease quite substantially. So adding to solid and, let's say, more normal clinical outcomes, something that was coming directly from the life of patients. So this is just an example. There could be many other, even in other diseases, but this for us was absolutely important, because something that started with one target, that was indeed creating collectivity and helping for wound care education, became something different, something that was or can be even useful to have a very concrete step ahead, both in clinical and even in access term, for instance. So yes, I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think this is a very powerful example, because it really shows how, even if in this case was a little bit unplanned at the beginning, but how the interaction with patient can really drive the continuum of product development. As you said, now you are using the results of this real-world evidence study, although at the beginning was not the initial intent, in front of, for example, regulators, payers, and for future clinical development. That's a little bit how it should be. While you were speaking, Enrico, I was thinking it could be interesting, you know, to publish these kind of results. And I think that especially in rare disease, is very important to publish also the qualitative results that we get from interaction with patients. Again, they have to be high quality data, they have to be robust, we have to have strong methodologies behind them, but the piece of information that we get from qualitative assessment of the patient journey, the unmet needs, the impact on quality of life, is something that, for example, we try to publish as much as possible, because again, like you said, Enrico, they give us an angle that we were not thinking. Dressing time, getting the evenings back with the family, in your case, having less pain while dressing in the morning. It's very powerful, I think, and really gives us the nuance of the real life of patients.
I think it's important, because apart the case itself gives you an idea that to me is fundamental when we are talking, for example, on rare disease, knowing that on the rare disease side, the data cannot be always so many, considering the small population that we are having, and there are very specific situations patient per patient. So adding, taking a discussion, a clear listening of what are the patient need effectively, I would say above and behind what is the typical clinical approach. As I said, we approach clinically, wound reduction time, a very clear thing. But in the end, to treat the disease is probably for the patient was more important indeed, the time of dedicated to dressing and the pain that is dedicated to dressing. That is incredible, unfortunately. This so open up a new front, if you want, a new area that can be investigated, obviously with strong, maybe even stronger than our PSP system, but at least some kind of channels of investigation that can have a better understanding of the disease as such. We have other cases, for example, metabolic disorder. You have, for example, the gastrointestinal issues. That is something that in many cases are forgotten and instead are an important part of the game. So,
yeah, totally. And another thing that I was reflecting upon is the fact that sometimes, and again, only talking under the lens of patient experience, data collection and validation, we might having even advantages of working with small populations. For example, in rare diseases, compared to more standard treatments where we have more treatment available and larger population, we might have, not always, but as Jennifer was saying in her example, we might have strong voices, people that are vocal about their condition and probably have fought for a long time to get treatments, on the market, as the example of Jennifer. So we might have this, let me say, advantage, again, just talking under the lens of patient experience data. We have unmet needs that are usually obviously difficult, so very easy to simplify the case for value with these very strong unmet needs. We have regulators and payers that might be a little bit more receptive to patient-centered outcomes, let's say today. And we have also frameworks for regulators, so FDA and EMA, that can support us. I think they have yesterday or 2 days ago also released another one, FDA, about personalized treatment in rare and ultra rare. So we have, let's say, some advantages also working with small populations that we can leverage to make our treatment development more effective. And Enrico, what do you think about a little bit what is happening next? I'm thinking JCA that is happening very shortly for rare disease. What's your, what do you think about that in terms of patient experience data?
Yeah, this is another interesting and important step. I mean, the joint clinical assessment that is next to come for also for rare disease treatment can definitely bring a great opportunity to have a systematic and rigorous approach to patient engagement and patient data in general. Let's see how this process is effectively developing, but definitely is an opportunity. We hope and we should do our best, not only as industries, but as clinical world, as other stakeholders, including indeed the payers in a way, and the regulators and the policymaker, to try to have data that can have a combination, let's say, of qualitative and semi-quantitative data together with the normal, let's say, clinical data that are coming from a trial. Also because this qualitative and semi-quantitative data are bringing different kind of view, let's say. The qualitative one definitely are giving more a concept of context in a certain way, through, that can be advisory board, can be interviews, can be experience shared by the patient, including, some daily challenge that are having, or even some emotion. Daily challenge in the case that we are doing before on EB was indeed the difficulties and the time spent in the bandage and in the care of wounds. This is important for the patient in rare disease, just because, as we said, there are some kind of specificity that has to be captured in one another. On the semi-quantitative data coming, for instance, for scored surveys or rating scale, there we can capture probably more concept like fatigue, like pain, like mobility issues, or other kind of symptomatology that are not captured in the normal course of the clinical trial. Before I was mentioning, for example, the GI symptom in many metabolic disorders. That can be another area. Fatigue in metabolic disorder is another major point. So, in a way, to simplify, we can say that the qualitative data and findings can represent a little bit the why something matters for the patient. While the quantitative or semi-quantitative data can represent a little bit how often or how much this matters for the patient community. And so adding this data in a 360-degree vision is the only thing that can indeed bring not only a more comprehensive discussion with the regulators and even the policymaker and payers, but even really driving what effectively means to make a patient-focused decision in development, for instance, or in access or in policy in general. So try to enlarge a little bit the view. It becomes rare disease is probably more needed than anything else. And as you said correctly, working with small population can be an help, but definitely required to capture as much as possible data that can be available, also in a qualitative point of view.
Thank you very much, Enrico. My suggestion is let's have our third poll. Then I will ask Gianni to comment on it because I see a lot of questions flowing. So I think that this way we have also enough time for the final Q&A. So let's launch the third poll, which is here. Looking ahead 3 to 5 years, how do you see patient experience data evolving in rare disease decision making? Becoming core evidence embedded from early development, remaining primarily supportive for value communication, increasingly required by regulators and HTA bodies, powering registries and predictive models, and then we don't know, unsure, depends. So what's a little bit your perspective? In the short to medium term, 3 years from now is not that long from now. Let's see the answer. So majority of the people say increasingly required by regulators and HTAs. And I mean, also following a little bit what Enrico was saying, this is possible. We have a lot of changes happening at the moment. We have JCA, also MFN, most favored nations. I mean, we have big changes that are happening, and possibly the patients, we are exploring to see how patients could be, what could move the needles in these new processes. And then, so this is 55% of our responses going for this, so the vast majorities. And then we also have becoming core evidence embedded from early development. Possibly, yes, hopefully. We have done a lot of progression, I would say, in the past 5 years, 5 to 10 years. Still, we have lots to do. Thank you very much. So we wanted to dedicate at least 15 minutes to questions, and I see there are more. I hope I'm not missing anything because the window, the tab where to look at the questions is a little bit small, but I hope that I will cover all of them. So first one, they're all difficult. I can advance to Enrico and Gianni. So how I can determine the right balance between qualitative depth and semi-quantitative structure in rare disease program. So how it's possible to see the balance between quali and quanti. Okay. Someone that wants to take it, maybe Jennifer or Enrico, you have an initial thoughts about it? Sorry, Jennifer, I skipped your last comment. I'm sorry about that. So maybe you want to cover the last comment that you had about the future of patient experience data, and then also answer the question.
Sure. Okay. So future of patient experience data. I do think, first of all, I noticed in the poll we said that people think it will be required by regulatory and HTA bodies in the future. I look at it almost the opposite, like it will be more accepted and more encouraged. Like we will be more able to submit it and have it be something that's valuable. I don't think we should be as scared that like, oh, they're going to start requiring it more. Like I would say we should take the opposite opinion, that like this is great, they actually want it. One example of that, we do a lot of work in myasthenia gravis, and over the last several years, it's become the primary endpoint for myasthenia gravis trials is a PRO. And so I don't know that many of us would have really envisioned that that could be such a thing, that a primary endpoint for pivotal trials could be a patient-reported outcome measure. But to me, at least, I think that's very exciting. It means that the patient's voice is actually really valued. And in some disease areas, in some cases, it doesn't quite make sense for it to be something that's reported by patients. But in some, it actually makes more sense for it to be something that's reported by the patient to be valued more than other measures that might be less indicative of how a patient feels, functions, and survives. So I think that that's very exciting. Even in cases like that, like that MG-ADL, which is the most commonly used primary endpoint these days, is still not indicative of the full lived experience of patients. And so we also see that, you know, for HTA submissions and for other purposes, there are other PROs that are emerging and being used to better encapsulate quality of life of patients that might not be captured by the MG-ADL. So it's a balancing act. I think it's very exciting that we're seeing more and more PROs be escalated in their importance in trials and in HTA decision making. Enrico, do you want to try to answer the question from the audience first while I?
It's definitely
Julia.
The super complicated question, I would say, and it's very difficult to find a balance, I think, there in a very pragmatical matter as indeed as industrial representative. I must say that while personally, after 25 years that I'm doing this job, I feel the qualitative part of data in rare disease are of an extreme importance. I would say in the end probably are the ones that are creating a decision making on treatment, even by patient and physician substantially changing. Probably I would try to work as much as possible to getting closer, having qualitative data, getting more closer to the semi-quantitative one. So try to have some kind of very measurable evidence in that. If we take some cases like indeed fatigue and pain, this I would say are already something that is utilized. It's not something that is coming in 10 years time, are already a presence in the discussion with the regulators of any kind. So, and this is a transition from something qualitative, because sometimes ago nobody wanted really to discuss about pain because it was unmeasurable. Or let's say the regulator were not even taking consideration. The fatigue point of view was something that even the physician were considering it much. I remember big discussion some times ago with somebody in which there was a physician driving to some kind of references on a clinical point of view, and patient that was denying this. He said, I perfectly don't care about this, I care about the fatigue that I'm feeling. And this is a development step. Surely much more we can create objective and measurable thing. Much more this will be immediately or more openly accepted by a regulator. And I think it's even right, the concept, not say. But it's a transition. So I cannot answer what is more important or which kind of percentage I will dedicate to that or that. I will try simply to live this kind of development that is happening. So it's just a simple thing to be followed, not an if. It's just a matter of how we do and what we do.
I can hop onto Julia if you want.
Sure.
In the registries that we develop and clinical trials, Alira Health is also a CRO and runs clinical trials, but in my business unit in registries, we often engage patients and clinicians, but we engage, the stakeholder community, more of which we're including patient voices when we're selecting the exact endpoints or questionnaires we're going to be putting into the design of the registry up front. And so I think what you were saying at the beginning, Julia, about using the qualitative to drive the quantitative really resonated, in that we tend to try to do either in-depth interviews or focus groups to hear what are the domains that are most important to them, as well as clinicians, as well as sponsors. But the patient voice is really important in deciding which of these questionnaires or data sources we're going to be including, so that when we're capturing those, and I think what you said as well, Julia, about publishing, why that was important, like what were the results of those qualitative engagements with stakeholders that arrived to the methodology that we did. We're doing that more as well. Right at the beginning, we're starting to publish what was the methodology that we decided upon and why. And so I think those are both pretty important points.
Thank you. And I want to quickly also provide another example of something that we have done that I think I can answer also another question. That was about how to, now I cannot find it anymore, unfortunately, because we have many, but it was about how to understand what prompts or how to build prompts based on the patient perspective. I just want to provide this case, which is a mix a little bit of what you said and also can answer this question. And it's about EOE, so it's it's very complicated name. Eosinophilic esophagitis, thank you. And what we have done in that case was doing a qualitative study, publishing it. So in order this to be part also of the evidence package, and then from the qualitative interactions that we have had, understood the unmet needs, so what prompts ideally should be in the clinical trial, and then making an assessment of the PROs, sorry, I say prompts, but I mean PROs available in that specific therapeutic area or in that specific disease. Now, if the overlap is not 100%, because sometimes the tool that we are using as prompts, as you said, Jennifer, maybe they are not fully embedding the patient perspective or answering the unmet needs. We have several options. One is creating another validated questionnaire, but it's long and very expensive, so sometimes we don't have this possibility. Another possibility is to tailor-make a bit the prompts based on the tool available at the moment. Another option is also making sure that we are explaining the prompts correctly to patients while they are involved in the trial, to make sure that they can answer it at the best, let's say, of their possibility. For example, we have had studies where these prompts were talking about pain in general, but people in that specific disease area, rare disease area, were not associating pain to their everyday life because they were not feeling it anymore. They were sort of used to it, but what they were feeling were other symptoms such as pins and needles and numbness, etc. So it's very important that we try to create something quantitative based on the quality and hopefully publishing the quality, so it's also part of the data package, but also then adapting as much as possible the PROs, considering timeline restriction that we might have. So this is a possibility. Let me share another question. 1 second. Okay, at this now I found it back there. What are the biggest pitfalls when translating live experience into measurable endpoints?
I have one. I mean, we're experiencing this right now, that whatever questionnaire or measure you're going to come up with is not going to make everyone happy and convince everyone that you're capturing everything that's important to them. So capturing like more than just 1 or 2 experiences when you're doing those qualitative steps, I think is important, because sometimes, you know, we might hear a really strong voice that thinks a certain way, that we need to collect all of these things. But then if you ask 4 or 5 others of those, you know, of that patient type or of that stakeholder type, you might find that actually it was really just important to that one person. So I think for me, for our team, like managing the strong voices and trying to make everyone feel heard and like we're accomplishing all of their goals can sometimes be difficult.
If I can add in this respect, I think a good step before designing which kind of data we are going to scout. Obviously, if we are able to have originally a deep level of phenotyping understanding, and as clear as possible, even in rare disease, not always you have this data in full, but if you can have natural history direction at least, or data wherever available, these 2 concepts that can help a lot identify, together with the patient voice, eventually with the clinician involvement, to understanding really which kind of data could make more sense. And later on, building some kind of methodology that can be robust enough and can be proven valid on a scientific point of view to have the data and analyzing data. If we start indeed from this phenotyping, I think we have made already a step ahead, even in terms of utilizability and acceptance of the data later on the regulator's point of view.
Yeah, I agree. I'm conscious of the time. There are 2 additional questions that I would like to answer, and then we will wrap up the session. So the first one being, when explaining patient experience data, you mentioned evidence. What are the differences between data and evidence, or even between data, insight, and evidence? So I told you all very difficult questions. What about this one? Maybe Jennifer, when you work with the registries, you classify
data,
those are
data powers the evidence. So you have the data, but then you have to analyze it and put it in a package where it makes sense to frame it as a piece of evidence. So just asking survey questions or just collecting an endpoint, that's data, but then someone has to actually analyze it and write up the manuscript of why this matters. So to me, that's how it transitions from data to evidence.
And do you think insights can be also translated to evidence? It's the same concept, just so data becoming evidence and also insights?
So insights becoming evidence, like qualitative insights becoming evidence? Oh, totally. Yeah. And actually, I'm glad you asked, because there's one final case study I didn't get a chance to talk about, but I wanted to mention within one of our registries on health storylines, we had a diary. So it was completely unstructured, completely qualitative. And something that we pulled out of there was that patients for one, it was a duopoly at the time, so 2 types of drugs. And for one of the drugs, patients were overwhelmingly commenting about their injection experience being horrible. We got some really great verbatims, like sometimes it is so sore that I cannot lie on that side for a week. The injection site is painful for too many days. And so we were able to, we blinded which treatment group that they were in. Well, they weren't in a treatment group, but which treatment they were using. We blinded that, we coded the data. We were able to publish a manuscript showing a statistically significant difference between the 2 groups. So not only did we have the power to do statistical analysis on that qualitative data, but we also got to take the verbatims and really put a lot more color to it. And so it ended up being a really powerful piece of evidence, even though it was not structured in a way that was quantitative to begin.
Clear, thank you very much. Do you have anything to add, Enrico?
No, I think the Jennifer were very comprehensive. The question was particularly difficult. I was thinking if I have anything of value to add, but I think you, Jennifer, has been totally comprehensive. So
I have one last question for you then, and then we can close the session. Maybe Enrico, you want to take this one. When we think about including endpoints in the clinical trials that address those the patients and caregivers unmet need, how do you think they will have a positive impact on the payer decision-making process?
They can definitely have. They can have if can be translated, or better, they have definitely a value per se if are based on a solid methodology to collect the data. And will have even more impact if this data are showing some level of economical effect. Just to be precise of what I'm meaning, in the case that I was mentioning before, the fact, for instance, that a reduction of time in taking care of the wounds, even for the family, by the way, this is obviously connected more than the family method and not the patient itself, but it's even also for the patient itself. It's something that definitely has a repercussion in what it means your ability to work, for instance. So in terms of absenteeism or sick leave or whatever. So if you can have, even starting from this kind of measurements, indeed, time of dressing, it's not a clinical parameter. It's something that is coming from something else. It's a kind of in between qualitative and quantitative is a certain way, because you can measure by time, but it's coming from a way of doing things. So there is a part of education even there. If you can translate this in something that has a tangible value, you can have a definitely conversation even on a payer point of view, if this is indeed was a question. And even in terms of what a treatment can bring in terms of changing the life of patients. In many cases, a rare disease, a small change in the way people are living, it means a lot for the patient, because it's a quantitative step, versus the difficulties they are running on a daily basis. Definitely, this I think is something that makes full sense.
Absolutely, thank you, Enrico. And also, I totally agree with you. We work a lot with our HEOR colleagues on that, but also I think another interesting point is when we are able to bring the patient experience data sort of in the hands of the patient community, and they can themselves advocate for those in front of payers. So it's very scattered at the moment, but as Enrico was saying, maybe with JCA we'll have some sort of homogenization in Europe, but also in US I think it's shifting. So it's still sometimes not clear or scattered, but there are opportunities for the patient community to bring the patient evidence data in front of the payers, in front of HTA, and really advocate for those changes that, as Enrico said, are super meaningful. A small change, and I mean, Jennifer also made very good examples. If we only look at the number, and if the payers, for example, only look at the numbers because that's the evidence that they are looking for as a first reaction, they will miss a context that cannot be ignored in a rare disease where, again, one data point is actually one patient and the family. So I think that also
just to my last point, I think that this is a kind of change mindset, Julia. Usually, you know, in the past, let's be realistic, the patient were a participant of our trial. That's it. Now are becoming and should become real partners in doing this. And if you can create, you know, this change of mindset, and this can definitely come to generate better decision and better data. So it means better therapies, and in the end of the day, the better lives for the people that are suffering of these diseases. That in the end of the day is the target of everybody of us. You know, moving from participant to partners, I think it's fundamental. Starting from clinical development through all the line up to the treatment at the patient bedside.
Great. I think this is a great place to stop. Thank you very much, Enrico and Jennifer, for your participation and your great contribution. Again, thanks for participating to this webinar ahead of Rare Disease Day. It was very important for us to have it in advance to this important day. And thank you for all the participants and all the questions received. Have a nice afternoon or morning, and thanks again. I will now close the webinar. Thank you.